जय हिंद, जय भारत एंड वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स। दिस इज आदि अचिंत। मेरे साथ हैं डॉक्टर गीता कोचर जो हमको बताएंगी जयशंकर जी गए थे नेपाल, वहां पर क्या बातें हुई हैं, व्हाट इज द मूवमेंट फॉरवर्ड, क्या चाइना को वहां पर बाय बाय बोल दिया गया है कि हेलो बोल दिया गया है, और कुछ डिफरेंसेस होंगे, कुछ सिमिलैरिटीज होंगी, कुछ अच्छी बातें होंगी, कहीं ना कहीं पे थोड़े से प्रॉब्लम्स भी होंगे। आइए देखते हैं व्हाट इज इट दैट जयशंकर जी वेंट टू नेपाल फॉर। नमस्कार मैम एंड वेलकम टू द शो।
Thank you, Adi, and namaskar to all your viewers. It's a pleasure always, back in your shows, discussing a lot about Nepal, China, this, that. It's a good shows. Yeah.
मैम बताइए, हमारा क्या प्रोग्राम था? लेट्स बिगिन विद दैट। व्हाट डिड वी, हम लोग क्या करने जा रहे थे? जयशंकर जी, व्हाट डिड ही गो देयर फॉर? हमारा क्या कुछ एजेंडा था? वी वांटेड टू टॉक अबाउट सर्टेन थिंग्स। व्हाट इज द प्लान?
Yeah, so there was a joint working, committee which is pending for more than a year. So one of the main, agenda because of why Jaishankar ji went there is this meeting, okay, the meeting of this committee. Which was already pending for more than a year or something, and everyone was talking about because it looks into holistic relationship between India and Nepal. So, he wanted that this should happen. The Nepalese were also pressurizing. We should have this meeting, and now I think the time could be adjusted because Corona had really taken a toll on all the kind of relationship that we had. We couldn't make up many of the things. And Prime Minister Modi's emphasis has always been neighborhood first. That approach is always there. And Jaishankar ji wanted to really push through that. There were, demands from the Nepali side also. And there were instabilities in Nepal as well, because of which there was a lot of delay because, only the Prime Minister stepped down, and then there was Deubaji was there. Then again, there was instability, all kind of factors. Now Prachanda ji is the Prime Minister. So even their prime ministers were not said. There was all political instability in Nepal, and so really we didn't know, how we are going to
Yeah.
approach. But last year when Prachanda came to India, and then he visited for China as well. But when he came to India, he had meetings in the BJP office as well with the government, officials, with Modi ji, with Jaishankar ji, and all. And gradually these agendas were set that we have to, come back to the track. There is a stable government, at least temporarily stable government in Nepal, and we have to revive those meetings and look into the overall nature of our relationship, because there are, in between there have been lots and ups and downs. And I was saying that this visit is sort of a new thaw in relationship. Jaishankar wanted to really reboot the relationship in one sense. एक पुश देने की जरूरत थी कि हमें अपने रिलेशनशिप्स को नए तरीके से देखना है। बहुत ऊपर नीचे बहुत कुछ हो चुका है। बहुत सारे पास्ट में प्रॉब्लम्स आ चुकी हैं, वेदर इट इज अ बॉर्डर प्रॉब्लम या मैप का इशू, ऑल
Hmm.
that was kept on coming. So we really need to put a stop on that, and need to fix the relationship, and look at where we can take this relationship. And then in between, because there were earthquakes also in Nepal, and we had to really see whether we can take the proper focus to our relationship rather than the internal problems Nepal has.
जी.
Nepal was also a little hesitant about of that. But Indian side also had other issues. The global issues were also coming up. We know that Russia-Ukraine war was the focus, and Israel, Hamas, this problem had come up. So the focus of global politics was also different. And as a big power, India also had responsibility to look into it. But now, when there are two things which are happening in India, one is this year is election year. Okay, so the whole focus is on what will be the result of the general elections, whether
Hmm.
BJP will come to power or not. Most likely it will, but yeah, yet we need to see what will happen. And the second thing is that Modi ji has already completed almost 10 years of his tenure in as a prime minister. So he also wants to look at the relationship that he started with. He started with this notion of neighborhood first. So if we look back at Prime Minister Modi coming to become the prime minister and taking over the oath, the first thing he did in his oath ceremony was to invite all the SAARC members and the neighboring countries, right? And Nepal was a part of it. And so we are looking at, all the neighboring countries, including Nepal, as a focus. So these 5-6 months I see from January to till the election time would be a resetting of ties, reassessing where and what went wrong, and where and what we achieved. So it's like a assessment from the party, from the BJP party, as well as from the government of what they have done. So that's also one aspect of it. And as I said, this meeting was pending. Jaishankar ji had, as foreign secretary, there were issues in Nepal against him because of the 2015 blockade. Everyone in Nepal started saying it is because of Jaishankar ji, things went wrong. And even when he took over as the foreign minister, and he went there on an official visit, people were still not at ease or not able to adjust with his this notion that he was behind that 2015 blockade, which is the label that was given by the Nepalese. um, so I think Jaishankar personally also, as a politician, apart from what he was as an ambassador or as an as a foreign secretary, he also wanted to reset his relationship with the Nepalese. And so I think what he's doing in this 2-day visit is meeting all the political leaders from the whole spectrum of it, trying to understand and make the bonding again. So that is one purpose I see. And of course,
Yeah.
there are other agreements which are lined up, which we can discuss,
The
during
I mean,
discussion.
I'll take the agreements because like what the readout is coming is about 8-10 points and bade, which doesn't even come with big countries, two big countries meeting. There's so
Mm.
many points that have been mentioned, so many agreements, cross trade,
Yes.
railway lines, this, that, whole lot of things are there in that. But let's go to the politics, ma'am. First, सबसे पहले तो I want to ask you, uh, प्रचंडा जी हैं वहाँ पर, and
Mm.
we know about the party and the communist, ideology which is there. Do you think that there is a change in the thought process within that party functionality? Because जो पिछले थे KP Sharma Oli, he took a very hardline stand.
Mm.
Now you can attribute it वो चाइना वाली बैठी हुई थी वहां पर ये वो and all that whole lot of things can be said. But the ground reality was he took a very hardline stand. We see Prachanda ji not taking a soft stand, but it's not that hardline stand. It's somewhere in the centrist sort of a game. But they're trying to push back China. Would you kind of agree with this sort of a scenario between India, China, Nepal sort of game?
So, if you want to understand how Nepal is changing under Prachanda ji, you really need to understand how the society is changing,
Mm.
per se. I mean, as I said, there was a lot of political instability, which has been a trend in Nepal,
In
but of
Nepal.
late, yeah, this was quite severe from, after the elections, there was no clear majority of a party, but, the UML and the Maoist, they united, that is Prachanda ji and Oliji's party, they united and they formed a government. Now, this coalition government had a lot of problems, and, there was a lot of tussle going on. And even if Chinese were trying to push to continue to have this unity of the communist in Nepal, it did not work
It didn't.
because of the frictions between Oliji and Prachandaji. And of course, many things came out where Prachandaji was clearly saying that there was a 2.5 years of tenure promise done by Oliji, that he will be their prime minister for 2.5 years, and next 2.5 years Prachandaji was
Mm.
be there. But it didn't work out, and Oliji was reluctant to step down. So Prachanda had to break the party, so that unity was broken. And then out of the court case, which the Congress party and the Maoist filed, they won the case. And then there was a coalition between the Congress party, that is the Dioba's party, and Prachanda ji, that is the Maoist party. And all this churning of politics, this kind of communist coalition, and then the communist, the Maoist having handshake with the Congress, and the Congress then having handshake with the other Madhesi parties, things like that. It really created a factor of influence on the Nepalese mind,
Nepalese.
No, they all realize that all these leaders are doing is basically running for their own power and position rather than doing anything good for the state. And even if the society had been, if you see the election result, the last election result, as I said, the majority was, somehow the communist coalition. The people in that sense were supporting the communist, right?
Communist.
So in one sense, most of the Nepalese were pro China and pro communist. They were thinking, China is a better option. The communist ideology will give us a better, future. But what happened after this, turmoil within the, political sphere of Nepal, as well as what happened after Xi Jinping visited Nepal? You see, there was a whole clear shift for the people to understand that China is really warning them that if you are trying to, break away, talk about your own sovereignty issues or things like that, and there is a threat to China in any sense because of the Tibetan separatist movement or whatever, President Xi Jinping in China clearly, gave a signal that we would be doing whatever is in our power, maybe breaking your bones and things like that. So this kind of statement coming from Chinese president, the first visit after decades, was really shocking for the Nepalese. And then gradually you saw that there were issues that came out about how Chinese were taking over some territories,
North.
and yeah, and they were trying to impose that these are Chinese territory, so that hegemonic attitude was visible. And then the Chinese ambassador clearly telling the Nepalese what they should be doing in terms of
Yeah.
having relations with India or not. All this created an impact on the Nepalese people, and they felt that, one, the politicians are trying to fool them. Okay, they are just trying to run for their own positions and power by whatever hook and crook. They want their own money and everything. And two, that the society in per se is not developing, and because of the corona also, the impact on the economic life of the
Mm.
Nepalese people is huge.
Yeah.
Many Nepalese have left Nepal. Youngsters are just running away. It's, there's a lot of unemployment. Poverty, of course, is very high. There is no infrastructure development in real sense, which they expected this government to do. So the hope that we'll have a stable government by the communists coming to power and then giving us a better life has really shattered. Okay, that is one thing. The second thing is that at the same time, there is another narrative which has come up, which is very strong. It is the revival of the monarchy. Many people have started to feel that they were better off when there was a monarchy
We
rather
spoke
than
about that.
these
Yeah.
multiple politicians who are fighting among themselves and doing nothing for the country. They feel that that whole notion of that nationalism is failing. The monarchy could give them that sense because Prithvi Narayan Shah, as a king, unified Nepal. Okay, so the Nepalese, in some sense, have that notion that if we want to be strong, a unified nation, and we can take over whether it is India or China or any other neighbor, any other strong power, it is only if we have a person like that king or that monarchical rule. Okay, and the third thing is that basically majority of the Nepalese are and will remain, as I have been constantly saying, are Hindus, right? So they also felt that this whole notion of giving us this chocolate of being a communist and then becoming a better life, a dream which China has done as and showing us that this is the model that we are going to give you, uh, never happen in Nepal. And so they now see India coming up as a very strong power, right? India's economy is doing better. It has revived much faster after the COVID. It is much better in terms of what China did after the COVID situation, the pandemics. The revival is quite fast. The freedom is quite there. So the Nepalese are also, at least majority of the section of the Madhesis are also looking at this, and some of the
Mm.
Nepalese from the Pahadis have also started looking at India as a very potential rising power. And so they feel that it is also that if we can be what we are from the core, that is the Hindus, then probably we can also become a much stronger a nation. We can cultivate a much more great civilization. We can promote our own culture. We can be more nationalistic, and we can build up our country. So that all these three factors influencing what the political situation is now. So when I see Prachanda ji, or even the Congress party within, when it is talking about creating a Hindu state, or when Prachanda ji is a little, as you said, he's not totally changed, but at least
Mm.
he has mellowed down in his approach towards, the Hindu notion, then of course, I do agree that his own inner core of Hinduism is also coming out. He's also looking at the mass reaction, the people's reaction. And because he is a people's person, I mean, his whole Maoist notion or revolution is basically a people's revolution, right? So he's a person who looks at what the people want and adjust himself. So he's adjusting to that reality. And the reality of Nepal now is that the majority wants a Hindu state back, if possible, even the monarchy back. May not be very easy, of course, but yes, if that happens, very good for many of the Nepalese. And then creating a state which is a very powerful state, which is independent, which is sovereign, which is not dictated by any power, whether it is India or China, but rise to an extent where it can be getting benefit from any country. So I think
Yes.
Prachanda is also trying to play with the same notion. He's trying to adjust to that realities of what the people want, and I think he's able to balance it up. So he's not definitely saying we don't want China at all. He's not negating that. He's still being close to China. He went to China, had a very good visit, and signed many MOUs. There are a lot of agreements. He wants to keep that balance, but at the same time, he's also understanding the pulse of the people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But ma'am, what China hates is the banning of TikTok. How do you think they see that?
Yes, China is also upset about many of the things Nepalese have done, whether it was the issue of border issue that they started to create a lot of hope halla in Nepal, or whether it was Chinese citizens who were arrested by the Nepalese, then they had to really readjust, all of that.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the issue of banning of TikTok, which the Chinese don't like. Maybe there will be another banning of certain other WeChat payment modes, because Nepalese also found many of the Chinese who were hacking their ATMs, the Nepalese
Hmm.
ATMs and things like
Hmm.
that. So there are these issues which have come out, and so the Nepalese government has taken a very strong stand. Chinese may be unhappy, but they have to adjust to the realities of a state not allowing certain things to happen in their country. And
Ji.
TikTok was also banned because, as it was stated in Nepal, the government felt that some of the opposition views that were projected were very they were not very healthy in nature. They were not very critical, but they were immoral in character, and they were trying to destabilize the state. So that is also one of the reasons why TikTok was banned. But I think initial response of the Nepalese was not very happy as well. I mean, the Nepalese themselves were also not very happy that TikTok is banned. But now we don't see so much of
Yeah,
discussion
they've
going
settled
on
down.
around that. Yeah, they've settled
Yeah.
to they've accepted this fact that yes, there were misuse of technologies by TikTok, and they also don't want this. So the Chinese probably have accepted that this is the reality. I think
Hmm.
it's not the business that they are banging on. I think Chinese are looking at other businesses which are more of their interest of in terms of investment and other projects.
Ma'am, two more questions. One is the agreements. पहले उस पे जाते हैं. Let's go to that, and then after that, I want to go into that border thing and the disagreements, if I may. So agreements के हिसाब में, ma'am, how do you think? Because one of the biggest thing that is happening is we are looking at Nepal getting connected to the northeast and getting
Mm.
connected to Bangladesh. So the hydroelectrical projects, they're saying, oh no, we need to link it with Bangladesh. We need to give it to you. So some portions of Bihar and all that stuff they want to supply
Mm.
energy to and all that stuff. How do you see the progress there, and how does that help both the relations? Does it kind of hitch up? Because economic cooperation to isi taraf ho sakti hai. If you look at the geography of Nepal,
Yes.
towards the north, it's not possible to do basic economic cooperation. But a lot of trade and on ground trade and on ground sharing of resources can happen towards the south. So, what has actually happened in that domain?
Yes. So we have already one agreement in terms of giving 10,000 megawatt of electricity to India. Nepal would be providing for the next one decade. And there would be, as you rightly mentioned, transfer of this electricity to Bangladesh also. So Nepal can also give it to Bangladesh. So these agreements, and of course many of the other agreements in terms of infrastructure development, and even their satellites, which PSLV would be launching, Nepalese satellite, that all signed. There is understanding between Gandhi University and Gorakhpur DDU University, Deen Dayal Upadhyay University in Gorakhpur. They have signed MOUs, academic exchanges. So there are many exchanges, innumerable exchanges which have. So it's an holistic, approach towards India Nepal, and that is why I see it's a new beginning in the relationship, a new thaw in the relationship between India and Nepal. And we do see that, as you rightly pointed out, that with China to have those relations is a bit tough because it is a cross Himalayan state. So unless and until there is a direct railway that is connected, which is in the pipeline, which comes into
Mm.
being, unless until China gives them many road facilities which are very, very restricted. It goes through Tibet, and there are a lot of checkpoints and restrictions of what can be exported, what cannot be. All that are eased, and then whether that can be, like China gave them transit route from Tianjin, but the cost of taking Nepalese goods to Tianjin would be so high that it is not feasible, right? So those ports which have been opened by the Chinese are not really working for the Nepalese as of now, and
Mm.
still they find it easy to have go through Calcutta port and everything. So I mean, on a overall, at the ease, at the connectivity, at the closeness, India is the first choice and will remain the first choice. It is the
Mm.
geographic reality
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Nepal. But yes, Nepal would want to develop relations with China, but considering whatever China can offer, but if China is going to deal with what is it stand is like equal footing, and not at aid, this time also I think our foreign minister Dr. Jaishankar ji's visit. During that, we have agreed for 600 crore aid to Nepal for the reconstruction project. So China is not providing those kinds of aid at large amounts, because it sees Nepal still being kind of an ally to India. May not be, but yes, it is more close
Mm.
to. We have certain agreements and cooperation which are security related, which are India and Nepal, ties which are very close. And because China looks that with suspicion, with some kind of
जी.
a hesitancy, that closeness with China will not happen. And because during 1962 war between India and China, we all know that Nepal and India's closeness was much more than what China could do. And China and Nepal also had historical wars, right? I mean, the Qing government and the Tibet, they all had wars with Nepal. So Nepal also looks at China as not being a very favorable country. Okay, in some senses, at the core of the minds of the people, China is not the first country with which Nepal feels at ease, whether it is in terms of the language, in terms of the culture, in terms of the religion. You see, all that is so connected with India that it cannot be dissected in any sense.
You
So,
can't,
apart
yeah.
from the geographic realities, there are these social realities and economic
Mhm.
realities which pulls Nepal close to India. So if India can give them, offer them a better, opportunity, better atmosphere, better, whatever they are asking for in terms of, trade routes and everything. If India can offer them, I think Nepal would be keen to have those relations with India rather than with China.
Interesting. I always say this, man, The Revenge of Geography, one of my favorite books, Robert Kaplan. Uh,
Yes.
like Maldives के बारे में बहुत लोग बोलते हैं कि ओ Maldives तो China ले गया ले गया ले गया. I always say this
Mhm.
as a counter. Maldives
No,
has
it's.
not gone anywhere. The leader has gone to China. Remember,
Hmm.
Maldives stays there, and
Hmm.
that is our ocean. So you can't move away
Hmm.
from there. आप कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So revenge of geography, when it comes, you'll come back to India because there's no other option. But ma'am,
Hmm.
let's come to the disagreements between India and Nepal. एक तो सबसे the biggest thing is the Lipu Lake Kala Pani Limpi Dura issue. Uh,
Hmm.
आपसे जैसे we were talking offline, you said that we've refused to even talk about it. And as a matter of fact, yesterday there were news reports that Mr. Jaishankar has just brushed it aside and said we are not talking about this. Let's talk more.
Hmm.
So, what do you think has happened there, and what else are the disagreements between India and Nepal?
So, two things which Nepalese are very keen in talking about is one about, of course, the border issue. which also links to the EPG issue, that is
Yeah.
the Eminent Persons Group, report. And the other is about what happened to the SARC, So anyway, SARC is not in the pipeline. Nobody's really raising
Indeed.
that this time, but they are talking about the border issue. They're talking about the EPG. The EPG report, I think, even last year in May, because this EPG, I mean, for your viewers who really don't know what this EPG is, let me just give a brief about what is EPG. It's an eminent persons group which was formed somewhere around 2016 to assess the overall bilateral relation between India and Nepal. And after 2 years of forming this eminent persons group, the report was prepared in 2018 or somewhere, and there were four persons from Nepal side and four persons from Indian side, and they were all diplomats and experts. So scholars were there, and as well as the ex-ambassadors were all there. But the report was never accepted by either of the government, whether it is Indian government or Nepal government. And so the Nepalese have been pressing about why this report is not accepted by Indian government, and why it is still pending. There was this Bek Bahadur Thapa, who was also a member of the EPG. Last year in May, he came out with this notion that because both of the governments are not accepting this report and there is no action taken on this report, the recommendations that were made by the EPG group, so he might go and make this whole report public. Which again created a whole lot of issue in Nepal, as well as there was a lot of discussion over that. And the Indian Foreign Ministry before that had made certain statements about this being, the EPG being formed as by the individuals, and it's an individual's report. No, it's not the government's, directed report. But the whole issue cropped up as after 2018, when the report was made by, or the recommendations were made by the group. There were differences of opinion on both sides. As I know from the Indian side, at least, the some of the scholars who were sitting there were quite unhappy with the way the progress of meetings were taken place, and how the Nepalese were, pushing through, forcing Indians to accept certain things which Indians were not willing to do. So the recommendations probably had certain, clauses which were not very convenient accepted by the Indian government, but it were put in the records. The second thing was that there was news that before the report was presented to Indian government or to the Nepalese government, the report had been given by eminent person group in Nepal to the defense attaché, the Chinese defense attaché in the embassy. Okay, and so it was leaked, privately. And because the contents were leaked, probably after that we had all these issues about Oliji coming out with map and creating a whole
Mm.
ruckus in the relationship. So in one sense there are certain issues, and of course the idea of this was also that they wanted to revise this 1950 peace treaty between India and Nepal,
Tranquility agreement.
peace and tranquility treaty between India and Nepal. They wanted to revise that, as well as take up all the border issues as well as other issues. So the recommendations were a holistic in nature, because it involved the entire gamut of relationship between India and Nepal. But because the report was leaked, and then there were other issues about how the report was prepared, and then the government, at least the Indian government, publicly, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stating that it was privately done and it was not a government individual government
Mm.
initiative, and the government was not involved in making this report, and so the recommendations was not accepted. And the Nepalese government also did not accept the report, and Deobaji putting the blame on Oliji, saying when Oliji was there in the power, why didn't he take the report, and why should I be taking? So all kinds of problems came up with
It's
it.
sorry, but it's still not been accepted by the Nepalese
No, it
government
is
now.
not. None of the
Wow,
none of the governments have
fantastic.
accepted that. And so
That's amazing.
the Nepalese keep on making that issue about why this CPG is not being accepted, and why we should not. And so, as I said last year, even one of the members wanted to make it public, which is not
Mm.
acceptable, because once the recommendations are made and there's the committee which you made, and you want to make it public to create problems. And the Indian side very clearly said that if you want to create some of the ex-ambassadors in Indian side clearly state, like Rakesh Sood said, that if you want to make this report public, which is supposed to be a government property, then you are actually trying to create another irritant between India and Nepal. So the intention itself is flawed. But anyway, I mean, it was all said that 2014, when Prime Minister Modi ji went, I think Prime Minister Modi ji accepted that we should have an EPG. But actually, this was an idea which the former Prime Minister Baburam Bhattarai ji had made to the then Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2011 or somewhere, to form some, eminent persons group and look at the overall relationship and dissolve all the problems. So in any sense, what Indian government has been doing of late, as I understand, is that I mean, there's nothing that the EPG can resolve. We have joint working groups, which are very government bodies, which now we have the the seventh meeting, which has taken
Yeah.
place, and these are the bodies which can look into overall relationship and come out with solutions to any kind of irritants and problems. And when we have these mechanisms, why don't we use those mechanisms rather than bringing some scholar
Create
or
a whole new
some
one. Mm.
diplomat, ex-diplomat, and then they are forcing each other to do certain things and things like that. Okay, that's one aspect of it. And second aspect of it is that the border problem that we're talking about, as you just mentioned about the Kalapani, Lipu Lake, and Limpudhira, there are issues which have already been discussed, and there are issues which have cropped up over a period of time, because it is also linked to the flow of the river. So with the
Yeah.
change of the river, the demarcation of where it was has changed. And so this also incorporates that as an issue, which I have published one paper in USI, United Services of India. I have published a detailed paper about that, which is publicly available if somebody wants to know detailed about that, about why Kalapani is not what Nepalese want to prove. It is not a part of Nepal in that sense, and why we really need to rethink about what are the problems within their own political, you know, uh, political leaders and the former king, which really created this whole issue. And so Kalapani is not a very simple issue, and then it falls in the trijunction of India, China, and Nepal. Why is it that when we made a
Mm.
road to Mansarovar, that the Nepalese came out and started talking about Kalapani, and when earlier, we had signed certain agreements about Mahakali River and everything, Nepalese were not talking about this issue at all. So I think it
Ji.
is also a political issue rather than a concrete border issue. In terms of the
Mm.
border issue, we have had mechanisms which dealt in dealing with the problems, and I think 96 out of the 98 border issues have been solved. I think only two which are remaining is the Susta border issue and this Kalapani thing. And it is we have the mechanisms to really sit down and resolve whatever misunderstanding or disputes are there. It is also how the leaders would deal in that. But I think what had happened in between is that there is, as you just mentioned, the Chinese were provoking the Nepalese, and the Nepalese came out with this new map, forcing that this whole area is there, and trying to force upon India that this new map should be accepted. But even the Chinese have not accepted this new map. See, so what they call as a chucha map, or whatever you call it as. And so if this map is not recognized by the two main major powers in Nepal's neighbor, I do not think internationally it will be recognized, even if it is passed by the Parliament of Nepal. So now the situation is that they have passed this map, but none of the leaders have the courage to go at a very what do you say global level and reverse this thing and say that this is not the map. Because if you want to really rechange the map, then also they will lose their power in Nepal. And if you want to pressurize, you will have just a narrative which is floating up, because the Chinese are not accepting and the Indians are not accepting this map. It is like individually you draw a map and you say, okay, it should be internationally accepted. This is not the way international border lines are created, right? So
Yeah.
Oliji has created this irritant in the relationship. I do not know when that will be resolved. So when Jaishankar ji is making a visit this time to Nepal, he wanted to avoid all friction issues and irritants which will create unnecessary issue. And he really does not want headlines to be coming up that he went to the visit and there were these problems. So I think that is why he avoided to respond to it. But if we look at the issue per se, and if there is an issue, I think there are mechanisms which will look into that and will settle it out. Of course, the joint
Hmm.
working committee is also one mechanism, but there are other mechanisms at the border,
Others also.
because
Hmm.
it is also a military issue, right? So
Ji.
the military needs to be involved into it, about how, because the Indian military post is still controlling those areas. Okay,
Hmm.
so it's also a very complex issue which needs to be dissolved according to the border resolutions that we have done. We have already, as I said, we have already solved many of the border problems with Nepal. So if there are one or
Hmm.
two which are left, we can always sit down and discuss that. I don't think
Hmm.
Jaishankarji's visit needs to be really pushing to this particular issue. There are other holistic problems which are very crucial for the overall development of the people of Nepal, as well as the exchanges between India and Nepal. And we are talking about the connectivities like the railway projects, the trading,
Ji. Ji.
trade
Ji.
routes. We are talking about the aid that is required for the reconstruction. Nepal is uh, I mean, there are reports that again they may have a very severe earthquake. So it's a very seismically very fragile state. So we need to really look at those reconstruction where people are having problems. We are investing in hospitals, we are investing in schools. I think these are the concrete issues we should be looking and talking about, rather than just talking about a small irritant which is a political objective of certain leaders to gain their nationalist card, play their nationalist card to gain their power. I think that is not required right now, and that is why I think Jaishankarji avoided that.
I think that's a very realistic way of looking at things, क्योंकि फालतू में कुछ क्रिएट करना कोई फायदा नहीं है. Calm the thing
Hmm.
down, build up cooperation, उसके बाद करेंगे बात. And it's not
Hmm.
an existential crisis for anyone actually. ऐसा तो
Actually,
नहीं
because
है
that's a
कि
very barren land. It's
it's a
not like
stupid,
somebody. Yeah.
yeah, just silly
Hmm.
sort of a thing. अब वो उनकी वो आंटी बैठी हुई थी, उसने थोड़ी सी चाबी घुमा दी. I don't want to need to say more. Ma'am, it's always a pleasure to learn from you. Thank you so much for taking out the time. This is an important discussion क्योंकि neighborhood कहीं ना कहीं हम थोड़ा सा we forget, and one is forget, two is I find very rotten narratives that
Hmm.
fly around the place. Some guy about 2 3 days back told me also, oh, we've lost Nepal, we've lost Bhutan, we've lost Myanmar. Lost where?
Hmm.
I mean, we had lost it a couple of years back, but things are pretty well. I think all of them have actually turned around, and uh, things are moving pretty well. So thank you for actually clarifying this on Nepal. It's always a pleasure, as I said, talking to you. Till next time, ma'am. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you very much, and pleasure talking to you.